All right, it is the Pete Sousa Show, and we are powered by the Rogue Media Network, presented by Slovaceks. And let's get you right to our next guest, Matt Mosley. Matt Mosley is obviously a guy who covers the Dallas Cowboys and has for decades, or more than a decade, we'll say. How long, Matt? Let's bring you in for this.
We don't need to.
Okay.
We don't need to drill in too closely on this, but I guess my first year covering the team was Bill Parcells' first year with the Cowboys, and so that would have been 2003.
Oh, wow. So more than 20 years. How about it?
There you go. Been on the beat, and before that, man, was covering some serious high school sports, and then one major Baylor scandal in 2003. And then suddenly I was put on the Cowboys beat. And so I've been covering that ever since at varying levels. The beat, when I was on the beat, man, it was a 24/7. It was a constant. It was me sneaking around airports, being out on tarmacs, finding coaches. I'm not quite doing it to that level anymore, but I still monitor them very closely and attend and cover every home game.
All right, so here's what I have for you. Looking at their schedule, it's conceivable. Now, I'm not going like I was with Baylor, right? They're not going to win out, obviously. But they could put together a little bit of a run here to finish off the season. If they were to win the season on whatever your definition of a hot streak is, could Mike McCarthy keep his job?
And by the way, I mean, you're welcome to predict anything you want to predict, because I was giving you a lot of props on the show the other day. Nobody had any thought of the Bears running the table, the Baylor Bears, and yet you spoke it into existence, and it happened. They won
dudes.
6 straight.
They got the dudes.
That's an amazing thing to have witnessed, especially on the in the aftermath of last season. Now, Cowboys wise, I mean, I do think they could tease everyone. I honestly think it might be best for everybody involved if they do what I think they're very capable of doing Monday night, which is getting blown off the field by the Bengals, by a quarterback who's having a tremendous season, but his team finds itself 4-8. If the Bengals put on the offensive show they're capable of putting on, and the Cowboys play like they normally play at home, this will be a lopsided loss by the Cowboys. So I do see, but I know what you're saying. Like, there is part of me that's thinking, my gosh, what if they got this thing to 7-7? And that is possible. That is possible. It's not like the Bengals or Tampa. It's not, or Charlotte, Carolina games coming up, I think, before the Tampa game. I mean, come on. What if they got it? What if we got really crazy here and they got it to 8-7? 8-7 wins you some divisions in the AFC. I mean, it even wins you give the NFC West right now is really up for grabs. I think the leader in that division is at 7-5. So, I mean, I don't like their playoff chances simply because of the division they play in, but let's not act like the Commanders are just tearing it up. I do think they improved to 8-5, but if you got this thing to 8-7, then we might be able to start talking about something.
Well, so is there a world where the Cowboys retain Mike McCarthy?
Oh yeah, that's what you had asked a while back before I started going off on something. I don't see it.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible, but I don't think you let them coach into the final year, miss the playoffs, and then bring everybody back. I mean, the only way you would do it is just if Jerry just owns all of this and says this was completely my fault, and then you give him the Dak excuse. But again, as Jerry has noted, they were not playing that well with Dak. So I think this is 98% chance that this will be a new coaching staff next season.
How big of a blow was it for this Cowboys team to get rid of Kellen Moore?
That's interesting, because let's not act like, I mean, they certainly were doing some good things, but I mean, Mike, they did win 12 games last year without him. I like Kellen, and I think he did some good things, but I think Mike was ready to succeed or fail on his own. And so he wanted a shot at trying to do what he really should have been asked in the first place. I mean, the idea of bringing in Mike McCarthy as some kind of CEO coach was always weird. Like, Jerry hires him and goes, hey, by the way, you're not calling the plays. Kellen Moore's calling the plays. So again, as long as Mike was here, it was always going to be awkward with Kellen. Now, that said, Kellen's continued to mature and will continue to be up for head coaching positions. But he seems to have found a place and a system that where he's doing pretty well. But I think his time with the Cowboys had ended, and I don't think any success or failure afterwards really has that much to do with him.
All right, here's another thing. You and Ed Werder talked about this on Doomsday Podcast. Of course, you can check it out on the Rogue Media Network. Rico Dowdle, his 100-yard rushing game was the first in like 20-something games, the first 100-yard rushing game for the Cowboys. Matt, I try to stay close to the fire. That blew me away. I had no idea that they had strayed so far from consistent success running the football. What does that say about Mike McCarthy's offense?
Well, it says that Mike is he's all talk. Like, he loves to talk about ground and pound and run the football, and he's not committed to it at all. And so I think that's why we were all shocked that Rico, there was a day where they gave him 20 carries. And even at one point there was one point in the game where even Mike couldn't keep doing it. Mike had to come out and go 3 and out and throw it around a little bit, even though the run had been working. But again, it just simply is not in Mike McCarthy's DNA to run the football. And it doesn't, that's why, as much as you would have, I think people would have liked to have seen him sign Derrick Henry. He probably would have been wasted here. Like, Mike is not going to stick with that because it's not who he is. So it doesn't really matter if it's Rico. Would Derrick have been better? Sure.
Dude, that's a great, that is a very good point though. And you wonder if that went into Jerry Jones's thinking at all. I don't even know that I would say he's that big picture, but that's a very interesting point that anybody would have gotten lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just the way it is. Like, nobody, Zeke was taken during and had his great years during the Garrett regime. It's not like once Mike showed up that oh man, Zeke's still really good. No, Mike didn't commit to it. In fact, that's the only reason everybody loved Tony Pollard is because he didn't get many carries. And so it was like the thought of what he could be, like anything, that's what got people excited. I do love that Jerry has now gone on his radio show and said that, he thinks momentum can carry over from one season to the next. So he's obviously already thinking, well, this team's winning now, so they automatically will win in 2025. But he also admitted that it could go the opposite way. And he said that losing a game like they did against Green Bay can have a holdover effect. Well, by the way, you don't think that we brought that up to Mike and Dak and everybody involved, and they all poo-poo it like, no, this year that has nothing. And even Jerry has said things like that. I'm not taking anything to account last season. That's last season. Imagine that. Now Jerry acting like the Green Bay loss is somehow what carried over into this season was his refusal to do anything about it, to react, to bring anybody in, to change coaches, really to do anything. I mean, he did change defensive coordinators, but only because he had to, only because Dan Quinn got hired to be a head coach somewhere. So you can't credit him for like, oh, good job, Jerry. You went and hired Mike Zimmer. As much as I'm a Zimmer guy, and he's a friend of mine, I mean, it's the least inspiring choice he probably could have made. He just went back to some guy that made him feel comfortable. Oh, wait, Mike's out there, hadn't coached in a year or two. Let's bring Mike back because that makes me comfortable. That's why it's kind of funny to me when you hear about Vrabel and Belichick and whoever else you want to mention. What Jerry always comes back to is what makes me the most comfortable. And that's who he'll hire. And if that's, I mean, it's rarely, he does not hire young assistants. And that's why that Ben Johnson has never, I think he'd probably be a great choice.
Yeah.
But that's never felt real to me because that doesn't feel like Jerry. Jerry's like literally today at some point going to look up Norv Turner and just kind of go, I wonder how old Norv is. All right, do you think Norv could still do this? Or could we have another crack at Wade Phillips? I wonder how old Wade is. He's still coaching some kind of USFL, whatever that is now. He's still coaching XFL. Maybe we could get him involved. So that's the kind of stuff Jerry really dreams about is who he can bring in that makes him happy. And it's all those people I just mentioned.
Is there any chance, and I want to talk to you about Baylor, but I want to wrap up the Cowboys with this. Is there any chance for Bill Belichick, or does Jerry see him as too high maintenance or maybe almost too territorial with the football team itself?
Okay, say that because my mind started floating into Baylor.
Okay,
are you saying what did you say about?
Bill
you're
Belichick,
asking me about Belichick. Okay,
as a prospective coach, is he too territorial with the football team itself? Like, would Jerry feel uninvolved?
Yes. He did not feel great, and he was mostly miserable during the Parcells years, and it would not be that much different than Belichick. And deep down, even though he does want to get back in, Belichick would not love the nonsense that comes along with this job. And I'm not even talking about people taking tours through his offices or something. By the way, that was my favorite when the Texans were a relatively young franchise, and I started covering like around the NFL, like 2007 or 8. I started doing more like around the NFL, and like it was just hilarious to go from covering the Cowboys to being on the Texans deal. And I go, hey, could I set up something to visit with Coach Kubiak? Could I visit with Gary Kubiak? And they literally said, well, I think he's back in his office if you want to go back there and check on him. Like that was different. It literally, John McClane, who's this kind of famous,
sure.
He's mostly famous because, he's good at tooting his own horn, but I also like John and I like giving him a hard time, but he literally had the run of the place. It was just like, John, he was with the Houston Chronicle. He's like, John, whatever. Yeah, I think he would set up all their media. Hey, guys, I'm going to need y'all to do this at 2:00 today. Okay, John, sounds good.
We've had John on the show as a guest. He's one of my favorites.
Well, yeah. John and I have been friends for a long time. John tells me one time, I'm like, John, it was like somebody had died that we both knew really well, and I just thought this is kind of a one-off. I'm sure John will come on with me. And John tells me, he's like, well, Matt, I've got an exclusive with Smokey. I'm sorry I can't come on. I was like, oh my gosh, okay.
All right, Mose, let's move to Baylor while I have you. This turnaround, can you put it into context with the Baylor's program and its history?
Well, I don't recall. I mean, I think that 2012 Baylor team is a really good comparison, but because they had stepped back, it was post RG3, and they'd gotten off to a rough start that season, and they flipped it and got it going. But at least with that team, you knew they had enough talent, some great defensive players. Florence had already put up some big numbers, especially that game against West Virginia. But this was the most unexpected thing I've ever seen in all my years of covering Baylor and being around it. I mean, I think we still had too much of that 2023 stink on us to possibly, and again, you benefit from not having the 50 years I've had around this program, because you can kind of see it with fresh eyes at times. Whereas most of us are like, okay, what's going to go wrong? All right. Okay. We're great. We've gotten great. Bryles era, and the carpet gets ripped out from under us. Oh, Rule brought us back. He leaves for the NFL. It's like we always kind of have that feeling of we can't have nice things sort of deal. Mm-hmm. So we had all resigned ourselves that this is not going to work, and this season's over, and they're going to have a new regime. And though he would never admit it, you have to think Mac and even President Livingstone were sitting there thinking about what's next and how's this going to go and how are we going to deal with this.
I'm sure you may know this, and I don't. I'm sure there were conversations, right, that took place. Like, okay, where do we go next? What are we thinking?
Oh, I think it's kind of like when Scott almost left. I think Mac was ready to move within 24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like, oh, let's have a time of mourning. I think Baylor would have had a coach within like 48 hours of Scott leaving to Kentucky if he had done that. And so, yeah, Mac, same thing with these NFL owners, even Jerry has some names in his hip pocket. So, certainly Mac hadn't formally launched any search, but he had some names probably in mind. He didn't want to have to use them, and he ended up not having to use them. And I made this point on my radio show. Sometimes it's funny, the same things that we get disgusted with coaches on end up being their superpower in a weird sense. And this sort of not unemotional, kind of aloof nature that Dave Aranda has, he might be one of the only coaches. I guarantee you, your coach at Richmond was not like this. And any coach you've ever been around, he might have truly been the one guy who could lock out the outside noise and not sit there and think. He's just wired so differently. And so I think his unemotional sort of burying himself in football somehow kind of sustained him and sustained the team as they fell to 2-4, because it is so easy for a staff to start to mail it in when it's going the wrong direction. It's so easy for the players to mail it in. And yet, once they had that huge breakthrough against Texas Tech, it's like the dam broke.
Tell you what, Mosley, that sounds like a really good column right there. Yeah, I think we need to get you back at it, bro.
I don't know. I may have to talk to Bryce to see if there's any room in the Waco trip. I don't know. I don't know if anybody will have me anymore. But it's kind of wild that his sort of quirky personality ended up, I think, being the perfect fit for this weird, crazy season. And now they have to watch it swing in the other direction, because they can't go next season. Now everybody's going to be picking them and saying how great they're going to be.
I couldn't agree more. If they can keep if they can get the band back next year, right?
Yeah.
And I think they will. I think Sawyer Robertson will stay.
So, yeah.
I think Cameron will stay. I think Bryson Washington will stay. Sawyer out of loyalty and because he is kind of different than the rest of the guys, period. And then, Bryson Washington, loyalty too. I mean, here's a guy who's right down the road and an hour away from home. Josh Cameron too. I mean, I believe they all come back, and I agree with you. So, like, the expectations are going to be so lofty coming into next year, which will be fun, but not so fun for Dave Aranda, I bet.
Yeah, I think that's right. And since you love hoops so much, by the way, well, I'm going to send you this Mark Pope thing I saw, if I can find it.
What is it?
And he kind of speaks to all this. Okay. He kind of speaks to like how normal human nature is after a huge win or a huge season to have a letdown, and then you try to guard against that and all that stuff. And Mark Pope, in about a 3-minute answer, I mean, honestly, I'm like, man, I think Kentucky may have gotten this thing right. Like, I'm sure Scott would have done a great job there, but I'm just telling you, his explanation for how they handle that kind of stuff made total sense to me. And I think so many coaches handle it the opposite of what he said. They dwell too much on trying to make something not happen, that they don't go out and make it actually happen. So anyway, Mark Pope, it was a good little speech. And I don't know. I think Mark Pope has a future as like a motivational speaker if this thing doesn't work out at Kentucky. By the way, if he loses like 5 conference games, they'll welcome him into being a motivational speaker there.
Yeah, and he's funny, having done a bunch of BYU games, right? He's great, like, in the things you're talking about, but then you'll be like, all right, coach, like, how's everything going on the day to day? He won't give you much before a game. Yeah. All right, Mosley.
Well, you would know that's your second home, buddy.
So today, I'm going out there on Saturday. I got a Utah game. So today, do you have Nikki Collin on the show?
Nikki stops by, have a great visit with her, and the theme at the end of that interview is help is on the way. I mean, how cool will that be? And it turns out that our friend Aaliyah, coming to us from, I believe, the Florida Gators, could show up and suit out as early as the 18th of December.
How about that little scoop right here? There you go, Matt.
Maybe I should put that out there.
I like it. All right, Matt Mosley, ESPN Central Texas this afternoon. Matt, I'm here for you whenever you need me. All right, brother?
Buddy, you're great. Appreciate you having me. Tell all the Rogue folks I said hello, all right?
You got it, Matt. Talk soon.
And tell GXG I'd like to have an occasional interview if you'll share with me. All right.
I'm working on it.
Bye.
Bye. Matt Mosley, that's our guy right there. And he brings up a pretty good point at the end of something I can't talk much about. All right, we'll come back. Final segment, final moments with our guy here. Cam Stewart is next.
It's the